Redditors who have missed time. For example, you're doing something at 4:28, the next moment it's 8 o'clock, and you have no recollection of anything that happened in between. What's your story? I got drugged and robbed on an international trip. Dude in a bar started chatting me up. I got up to go to the bathroom, left my drink unattended. Next thing I know, about an hour later, I'm disoriented and standing outside the bar and my stuff is gone. All in all, was still a fun trip. Never change, Berlin. It happened to me in first grade. Class was over and I remember walking deliberately to the bus pickup area. Only, when I got there were no buses. No kids, no teachers, just an empty parking lot. I went back inside where my teacher found me and called my mom. I've always wondered if I'm repressing some horrible event. Accidentally played Skyrim for 13 hours straight once without realizing it. I don't think I even took breaks. Just suddenly the sun was coming up and I was like, oh shit. I once played Earthbound almost completely through in one sitting over like 48 hours or so. Had some sense that it was a long time, because the Super Nintendo was in my brother's bedroom and he was coming and going, sleeping and waking. I wanted to just finally finish the game, but just before the last boss I got up to pee and when I sat back down I couldn't feel my hands and my thumbs were both blistered. I went to bed instead, and have never finished the game. That was probably the last time I touched a Super Nintendo at all. I used to work nights a long time ago. I was about 19 or 20 at the time. This was pre-cell phones. I got off work around 4 AM and it usually took about 30 minutes to get home. There is a fairly empty stretch of highway to get home. Small farm in the middle of nowhere. Driving along the road and it was like I drove into a cotton ball. Everything was so white and so bright. It washed out the color. I could only see the road a few feet in front of me so I stopped and pulled over. It was weird. No panic. Just a mild curiosity. I got out of the car and looked around but it was cotton ball everywhere and so quiet. And then it wasn't. It was like a vacuum sucked up the whole cotton ball up and turned the color back on. I looked around and there was another car, maybe 100 feet away, and both of the passengers were like me, standing outside and looking around wide-eyed. We waved at each other, got in our cars and left. When I got home mom was at the kitchen table and asked where I had been. I gave her a funny look. She said she had been worried as it was almost 8 AM. I am normally home by 4:30. I would have sworn that the whole thing lasted less than 15 minutes total. That the sun had come up really didn't register. The missing time didn't register. I never turned the car off and the tank did not reflect it running for an extra couple of hours. Mainly aged. Sometimes I get to work, forget to take my medication and then realize literal hours have gone by and I've got no idea what happened in that time. ADHD my whole life. You should know that that is not normal and it sounds like you might have a little more going on. Get checked out. I was sick, had a long day at work, and I made the mistake of asking my in-laws if they had anything to help with my cough. My mother-in-law came back with a little dosage cup and told me to drink it. One moment I was feeling better and playing video games in darkness. The next I was being handed the phone by my wife in a room flooded by sunlight. On the other end was my boss, concerned with why I wasn't at work. Me, I'm sorry, so I took something for my cold, and the last thing I remember was yesterday a little after 10. What time is it now? Boss, it's 3:30 in the afternoon. You must have been sicker than you looked. I'll put it down as a sick day, take tomorrow too. I'd spent 17 hours passed out in an office chair because my mother-in-law had given me a double dose of NyQuil instead of cough medicine. I was exhausted after being rotated closing opening every other day for 2 weeks. I got in my car after a particularly long day, started it up and waited for it warm up. Next thing I was aware of was sitting in my parents' driveway. I was about 20 at the time, had just broken up with an a-hole and moved back, with the car off but I was still buckled in. My job was 12 miles, straight shot on the freeway, from home. I have no idea how I drove myself home safely, because I have zero memory of it. It's not the juiciest story, but it really freaked me out at the time. I was playing games on my computer one evening at around 10 PM and decided to just finish what I was doing and then head to bed since I had work the next day. Next thing I know, I'm sat in front of a black screen in just my undies and it's 4 AM. Computer was cold, so it must have been off for at least a little while. No idea what happened because I don't have a history of sleepwalking. I decided to take an impromptu weekend trip for my son's birthday. He lives in Wichita, I lived in Atlanta. Flights were too expensive so I decided to drive. This is a 17-hour drive each way without including stops. I made it in time for his birthday but had to drive back home a few hours after. After about 4 hours of driving it was 8 AM. I remember distinctly checking the time. Next thing I remember is glancing back down at the clock and it being 2 PM. Scariest moment of my life. I panicked like I had just slept through work but instead I slept through 6 hours of driving. Highway hypnosis. You weren't asleep but your brain decided none of it was important so it just doesn't get stored. It happens because the driving is so repetitive. Too long. Didn't read. Do not mix sleeping pills with alcohol. Was on a transatlantic flight. Got into a good conversation with my seatmate. Had several glasses of wine. Then about 4 hours from the destination, we both decided to get some sleep. But I was still animated from the discussion so took a sleeping pill. On landing, the flight attendant woke me up. I exited, went to baggage claim, was picked up by my friend, went to her house, then crashed on the sofa. Several hours later I awoke and could remember nothing of the landing, getting off the plane, going to baggage claim and immigration, meeting my friend, the drive to her place, our conversation, nothing. A complete blackout. Complete memory loss. No telling what I did or said during that time. They mean it when they say on the pill bottle do not take with alcohol. Not me, but there was a glitch in the Matrix thread that had a pretty cool one. From what I recall, a guy was taking his driver's license exam and they were approaching the first stop sign. He remembers preparing himself for what to do as it was a 4-way stop. The next thing he remembers is his driving instructor saying did we pass that stop sign, followed by him looking in his rear view mirror to see it already behind him. That's possibly an absence seizure. Usually I'm under-medicated with adjutant hyperfocusing. I look at a clock, it's 9 AM, seconds later my paper is done. It's 10 PM. I'm thirsty, hungry, tired, and have to use the bathroom all at emergency levels. I have PTSD and this happens a lot. Just flashbacks and memories I get caught in and can't escape. I snap out of it sometimes minutes or hours later. Had full text conversations whilst in the middle of it I don't remember. I also suffer from PTSD. Once you have regular sessions with a psychologist these will get a lot better. Wishing you good luck. I work the night shift at a warehouse. There were several days, usually around 3 AM or so, when I would kind of regain awareness. What is this in my hand? Where did it come from? Where am I supposed to put it? How long have I been sleepwalking through work? How many mistakes have I made? Would happen maybe once a week or every other week if I loaded up on caffeine energy shots. I've moved buildings and can't stay awake my whole shift these days. Could have been worse, honestly, and I'm genuinely surprised that this never caused a bigger problem than mildly freaking me out considering I worked around heavy machinery and conveyor belts a lot. I went to a festival one weekend a few summers back. It was a pretty heavy weekend, but nothing out of the ordinary. I drove back to my apartment on the Sunday and figured I'd have the day to myself and just chill, get some takeaway etc. So I get in, pop a couple at Islam, similar to Axe, and smoke a joint. Come to and it's Wednesday evening. I had missed 3 days of work, most of my stash is gone. Call log shows I had 2 7-minute phone calls with a director from my company at some point and I had absolutely zero recollection of anything since Sunday afternoon. It was absolutely wild. Never been so disorientated in my life. Luckily everything was okay with my job and I ended up just going in on Thursday with minimal repercussions. I had a bit of a drug problem at the time and this was the low point that made me start turning things around. I was a kid. My family and I were staying in a hotel room. We had just finished watching The Land Before Time and everyone else had fallen asleep, but I stayed up because I wanted to watch the snow on the TV for no reason. One minute I was sitting in front of the TV watching the snow while everyone was asleep. The next moment, I was still sat in front of the TV with eyes wide open, only it was morning and everyone was waking up. I felt like I had slept all night, but I don't think I ever closed my eyes. I can only assume I hypnotized myself. If you liked this video, then you might like interesting facts about the human mind, or these other videos.